All right, Tati. So number one, we've got Rick Rubin, who's obviously the goat of all goats, my favorite, talking with Jack Clark, the co-founder of Anthropic. We've got Andrej Karpathy speaking to Y Combinator about the evolution of software within this new AI era. We've got all sorts of other topics that you and I just were speaking about before we jumped on to this recording and this call. But I guess the first question I have for you is, how do you think about this notion of alien intelligence and the difference between what we've understood about, the way that AI has been positioned, and how we're starting to understand just how powerful it is, and this idea of alien intelligence that was discussed by Rick and Jack, as well as how Andrej Karpathy kind of made it more practical and said, here's how you want to think about what an LLM is and isn't, and how software will be designed and built go forward. Lots to unpack, so go in any direction.
I really enjoyed this content actually, because I thought they really dug into some things that I've wanted to see someone as smart as they are digging into. So I was very selfishly very excited to see this. But this notion that the alien intelligence is a feature is not a flaw. That these LLMs, they are alien. They're not human. They are that's the whole point. So they're not intuitive. They do not reason like us. They make these weird jumps at times. It's not a bug. It's their edge. It's how it works. And so the goal, what I love is sort of how this crystallized for me, that the goal is really not to humanize the model. The goal is to productize this alien intelligence. So you got to stop asking the model to if it thinks like you. I think ask if it's thinking differently enough to find the things you missed, to find the things you wouldn't think about. And I think the best teams, in thinking about operationalizing this, the best teams are learning to co-pilot with the alien. They're not trying to tame it. They're not trying to make the alien pilot like they do. And that's I love analogies, but that's a really clear analogy for me. And like how you're just sitting, you get a seat next to it, and you try to figure out how you do this best together, instead of, let me have the alien make me better, or vice versa. And this sort of tug of war, it's not. So that's I think that's the main piece for me that stuck out from that.
I agree. And I think the conversation between Rick and Jack around Shakespeare was really interesting. So when Rick, essentially said, well, hold on, Jack, and it was really cool because Jack's not quote unquote technical as an engineer, but he's the co-founder of Anthropic. And Rick, of course, is not technical, nor does he play instruments. And so there's like a way that they were talking philosophically and in a strategic way that I thought was, and creative, that was fascinating. But Rick basically said to Jack, I don't understand. He's like, are you suggesting that the models are cliff notes of Shakespeare? And that's a little concerning, because what does that mean for the future of the next Shakespeare? And that's when Jack explained, no, it's more so we're always going to need Shakespeare and want to have Shakespeare. It's that, imagine having a colleague on demand. If you needed to understand Shakespeare and you didn't have, much understanding of Shakespeare, but it was tangential to a problem or an opportunity you're trying to solve, now all of a sudden you could ask essentially someone who has read every single word that Shakespeare ever wrote and say, here's what I'm thinking about. How do I think about this through the lens of what Shakespeare would say, or your thoughts on that? From a lens of someone who has read literally every single word of Shakespeare, so I don't have to read that myself. And I think that was kind of interesting too, right? Is just better understanding and grasping that it's not the source data, it's not every single word of Shakespeare, but it's the ability for the model to understand the relationship between all those words, and then abstract that, and then help you understand how to interact with it to solve a problem, or build on an opportunity without having to read all those books.
And it's, it goes back to that concept, which we talked about a few times on the AI enhanced humanity, right? So we're talking about like, this is not, they're also not meant to, we're talking about earlier, like it's supposed to co-pilot. They're not supposed to operate alone. So it's not like people often go to, and that example, as many others, often when I talk to boards or to clients, you have this like, go, but what if all goes wrong? And if it goes in this direction and none of this happens, well, you're supposed to have here. Let's talk about what governance looks like. Let's talk about what these checks and balances look like. Uh, which in a way, like, we are co-piloting with these with these clients of ours to help them figure this out. But, they generate, we verify that we try to close this loop as fast as we can. Right. So it's not, I think where many are failing on thinking about this is assuming that these LLMs should operate alone, and just rewrite Shakespeare and pass it for my own, and etc. Like, that's let's slow down for a second. And yes, it could totally do that. It could hallucinate. It could deviate. But it's not supposed to be alone in this. It's supposed to and again, the quicker we get to the understanding that this works in that is alien, that it works in a different way, that is going to, the quickest we get to the part where we harness its power the best, right? And that's going to continue to change and evolve. But I think that the great AI is not going to be fully autonomous. It's going to be very usefully orchestrated. And
Yeah.
it's the Iron Man suit, right? Not the Iron Man robot.
So let's touch on that, because I thought first of all, Andrej Karpathy is, he's unbelievable. He's the guy that coined vibe coding by accident. It's he mentioned that in that presentation of Y Combinator, where it was just like just a thing that he tweeted, and it turned out to be the thing. But you touched on a couple of things there, Tati, which I loved, is thinking of AI and the LLMs as the generators, and the human interacting with the AI as the validators, more or less, right? And then that loop around and around and around. And I think one of the things that he also touched on that was cool is that autonomy slider. And to your point, the way that humans and the machines work together in bite-sized chunks where we can help each other is this loop. And that loop of how fast you can spin that loop is really important. And I think a lot of us sometimes forget that it's not just AI, right? It's not that at all. You want to build these operating systems that embrace the evolution and the way that software gets rewritten, the way that it gets written, meaning, there's a lot of legacy, SaaS that is, under a major amount of transformation and pressure, for a variety of reasons. And there's also a lot of, generative AI and AI native, software. He called it LLM apps that are being built, that could go hand in glove with the evolution of the legacy software. But all of this is the stuff that needs to be thought through, because to your point, you have to remember that the LLM, it thinks and operates differently. It's the alien intelligence,
Yeah, and you got to know, in what you're saying, like a couple of things have come to mind. So the first is like, you got to know the superpowers, and you got to know where it falls short, right? So they're great at some things, they're terrible at some others, and that likely will continue to change. But right now, you look at memory, you look at search, you look at that speed, and the surface that they can cover is unparalleled already, right? And on the weaknesses side, where they fall short, they're reasoning at times, logic at times that falls a little short, and consistency and the hallucination. So again, it's you do, and I love your analogy that you always do, but you don't give the toddler the keys to a car, right? So you build the car seat,
or the teenager a gallon of tequila and the keys to a Lamborghini. No,
the keys to a Lamborghini. In this case, you build a car seat. You don't just give the toddler the keys to the car and go. You got to go there, right? You got to build a car seat. You gotta. Same with the LLMs. And again, and the other thought that came to mind is that we talk so much in leadership about collaboration, how collaborative we are. And, you know, every person, every leader out there, every person you interview will likely describe themselves as collaborative. This is really the test. Like, can you be collaborative with something that's unlike you? Can you really figure out how that comes together and is not how you want it, and is not, and often again we go back to these mental models that, and I draw the parallel with operations, with things that often in silos, right? How do silos get created? Because often it's like, well, are you doing it or am I doing it? Because it's my way or is this your way? And this now is going to become front and center, because if you try to do this with the LLM, I mean, the silos were already a loss for companies and for organizations and for teams. But this means like you're really going to get knocked off the rink. Like you're going to, that's not how this is going to work. So this idea of like, well, how do we really test that? Are you really collaborative? How do we really test that collaboration? So it's, I think it's a very interesting way in which we're thinking about it, and very different. And again, another thing that's very common is this handoff idea, right? Let me do this, or I hear people like, oh, let me train my model so I ever need to look at it again. Really, that's how you're thinking about this. So I love all the aspects of the conversation and how it went in that direction. That you, in order for it, and being the process lover I am, this is really the baseline of process, right? First of all, you're always updating and you're always looking for the next thing, and you're always thinking about better ways to do it. That's the true continuous improvement. But also, you know that what you know today is not what you're going to know tomorrow. There's never a moment when you leave it alone and never look at it again.
No, agreed. And I think that, we'll kind of leave it on that, right? Is that I think we're starting to see the beginning of the next phase, because everyone's talking about enterprise AI agents and so on and so forth, which, by the way, devil's in the details below the waterline on that. And I think we're going to see a lot of chaos ensue on that front as folks start to realize, this stuff is a lot more complicated than I think most have realized. But the collaboration between humans within their workflow and LLM enabled AI systems is where I think there's a lot of magic to be had. And I think there's a lot of really difficult decisions to be made about how quickly legacy SaaS applications will or won't evolve within this new era. What should be built from scratch using LLMs, for example, and how to make all those partner, buy versus build, questions become a reality in an environment that's moving so fast. So appreciate the conversation as always, and we'll make sure that we link out to Karpathy and Rick Rubin and Jack Clark's conversation, because it's a bit long, but I think it's worth folks checking out.
It's a great watch and a great listen. I can tell, maybe you listen to it, I don't know, when you're walking outside or at the gym or something. It's worth it.
Agreed. Thanks, Tati.
Cheers.
See ya.